You tell yourself this time will be different. You make promises in the quiet hours of the night when no one can hear you bargaining with yourself. You delete the app. You pour the bottle down the sink. You swear it's the last time. You count the days, measure your victories in fragile hours, and call it progress. You muster every ounce of your so-called willpower like a soldier preparing for war, and for a while, you believe it's working. Until one moment of weakness arrives small, silent, deceptively harmless, and suddenly, you've lost again. The promise is broken. The cycle restarts. And then comes the part that hurts more than the relapse itself, the moral hangover, the shame, the disgust, that voice that whispers, "What's wrong with me? Why do I keep doing this to myself?" You look for words to explain it. You call it a bad habit, a lack of discipline, a character flaw. You tell yourself that if you just tried harder, if you just had more control, more strength, more resolve, you'd finally be free. But what if you've been fighting the wrong battle all along? What if the enemy isn't weakness, but something older, deeper, and far more cunning than a simple lack of will? Because maybe, just maybe, this fight isn't about self-control. Maybe it's about possession. The self-help world will tell you that your addiction is a malfunction of habit, a bug in the software that can be reprogrammed with enough consistency and the right morning routine. They promise you 21 days to break a habit, or just replace the bad with the good. They treat the soul like a spreadsheet, as if human suffering could be solved by discipline alone. But that's the lie, isn't it? Because if habits were all it was, you would have fixed it by now. You've tried the hacks, you've read the books. You've told yourself never again 100 times. And yet something stronger than logic pulls you back, something that doesn't respond to discipline, reason, or shame. That's because what you're fighting isn't a behavior, it's a presence. Carl Gustav Jung, the Swiss psychologist who mapped the unseen landscapes of the human mind, once said that the psyche is not a unified whole. It is a parliament of forces, each with its own will, its own agenda. Among these forces lives what he called the autonomous complex, a cluster of memories, emotions, and impulses that break away from your conscious control. To Jung, this wasn't a metaphor, it was a diagnosis. A complex can possess the ego, hijacking thought and emotion like a spirit taking over a host. That's what addiction is, not a habit, a complex. An autonomous entity living inside your psyche. In older language, we would have called it what it truly feels like, a demon. And the terrifying part? This demon isn't something external that invaded you. It was born inside you, shaped from your own experiences, your own pain, your own buried desires. It knows you intimately, your fears, your memories, your secret needs, and it uses them against you. Every time you feel the pull, every time you rationalize the next hit, the next click, the next escape, it's not you making that choice. It's it whispering through your voice. You don't have an addiction. The addiction has you. This is the dark truth. Jung was pointing to the fragmentation of the soul. When the ego loses dominance, the complex takes over. You think you're acting out of choice, but really, you're being moved like a puppet. And the strings are invisible. To understand this inner demon, you have to trace its origin to the basement of your psyche, the place Jung called the shadow. The shadow is the hidden cellar where you've buried everything you couldn't face, the anger you were punished for, the loneliness you were shamed for, the grief you were told to get over. Every unacknowledged emotion becomes a seed, and over time, those seeds grow into autonomous beings. Some protect you. Some consume you. Addiction is one that began as a protector. It started as medicine, a way to quiet the storm, to soften the edges of pain that no one seemed to notice. Maybe it was loneliness, maybe inadequacy, maybe trauma. But whatever the wound was, the habit began as relief. It worked until it didn't. What began as your guardian became your jailer. It's easy to hate the demon. It's easy to say, I just want to get rid of it. But that's the paradox. You can't destroy something that was born from your own mind. Every act of resistance only feeds it more energy. Because when you fight it, you are still engaging with it. You are still acknowledging its power. And what you resist persists. The addiction feeds on your guilt. It thrives on your inner war. The harder you try to suppress it, the more desperate it becomes to assert control. You tell yourself you're using willpower, but willpower is the weakest weapon in this fight. Because it's the ego, a fragile flickering light, trying to cage a force that's older and darker than reason. So maybe the goal isn't to kill the demon, but to understand it, because inside its hunger lies your greatest power. The very energy you waste in fighting, it is the same energy that could transform your life if redirected. Jung used to say, the gold is in the shadow, meaning the parts of you that terrify you the most are also where your potential hides. Think about it. The obsession, the focus, the relentless pursuit that addiction demands, all of that is energy. Imagine that energy no longer chained to destruction, but harnessed toward creation. The same fire that burns you could forge you. But how do you do that? How do you stop being the victim of your inner demon and become its master? Jung gave us the map, but it was another thinker, Friedrich Nietzsche, who gave us the method. If Jung told us where the demon lives, Nietzsche told us how to ride it. Nietzsche saw what most people refuse to see, that the forces we call dark, unacceptable, or sinful are not mistakes of human nature, but its raw material. He spoke of the will to power, not as a thirst for dominance over others, but as the fundamental pulse of life itself, the drive to express, to expand, to overcome. When this force is denied, when you are taught to suppress your instincts, to label your desires as wrong, that energy doesn't disappear, it twists. It hides, it mutates into something else. That is the birth of the inner demon. Addiction, then, is not the presence of evil, it is the corruption of vitality. It is your life force turned inward, suffocating itself because it was never given a path to rise. Nietzsche would call the moral attempt to just stop a slave morality, a weak rebellion against nature itself. You can't silence a volcano by telling it to be calm. You have to learn to channel the eruption, to build the path where its fire can flow without destroying you. So the question becomes, how do you transform that inner fire, this obsessive, possessive energy, into something that serves you instead of consuming you? The first step is recognition. Jung called it withdrawal of projection. The demon thrives in secrecy, in the fog of confusion where you mistake its voice for your own. The moment you name it, the spell weakens. You stop saying, I want this, and start saying, it wants this. The addiction loses its disguise. It hates the light of awareness because that light reveals it for what it is, a fragment of you, not your entirety. Try it the next time the urge rises. Instead of collapsing into shame or resistance, take a breath and speak inwardly. The demon wants this. Observe how that single shift creates distance. For a brief moment, you become the witness, the one who sees. That moment is power. That's where the exorcism begins, not with fire and prayer, but with clarity. And here's what follows. Once the demon realizes you can see it, it becomes restless. It changes tactics. It might whisper, you deserve it, or just this once, or you've been good lately. It tries to seduce you. Because its survival depends on your identification with it. You have to learn to stand in that space between the impulse and the act, to feel its hunger without obeying it. To treat it like an unruly child throwing a tantrum. You don't argue with the child. You watch it until it tires itself out. This is not suppression. This is observation. And observation is control without force. Once you've seen the demon clearly, the next step is dialogue. Jung called this active imagination, a conversation between the conscious and the unconscious. Sit down, literally, and talk to it, write to it. Ask, what do you actually want? Because here's the truth. It doesn't want the substance, or the screen, or the cycle. Those are merely vehicles. What it craves is the feeling behind them: peace, power, connection, relief. When you uncover the real desire beneath the addiction, you reveal the wound it has been trying to heal. Maybe the demon drinks because it's tired of being unseen. Maybe it seeks pleasure because it's starving for love. Maybe it isolates because it fears rejection. When you understand its purpose, you stop seeing it as an enemy and begin to see it as a distorted ally, a protector that's lost its way. You can even give it a name. A name makes it real. And what is real can be negotiated with. Anger, hunger, emptiness, lust, call it what it is. Because when you name it, you strip away its invisibility cloak. The battle becomes dialogue. And from that dialogue comes the most crucial transformation, the third and final step, sublimation. Nietzsche's word for alchemy of the soul. It's the art of redirecting destructive energy into creative power. This is where the demon stops being a parasite and becomes a partner. You begin by asking, what is the essence of this addiction? What energy drives it? Is it obsession? Escape? Desire? Each one hides a gift. Obsession can become focus. Escape can become imagination. Desire can become ambition. The key is to find a higher purpose that can absorb that energy without judgment. If your addiction was a way to numb failure, then let that same energy fuel your mastery. Work until your craft becomes your new intoxication. If it was about control, channel it into discipline, training your body, your art, your mind. If it was about connection, transform that craving into empathy, into creating something that moves others. You don't kill the horse, you learn to ride it. Nietzsche said, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. Your chaos is not your enemy. It's the raw energy of creation. The only question is, will you use it to burn or to illuminate? Stay with me, because this is where most people turn back. They get stuck between guilt and guilt's opposite, denial. But you're not here for half-truths. You're here to see what lies beneath the surface of pain, to look the demon in the eye without flinching. Because when you do, something miraculous happens. The moment you stop fearing the demon, it changes shape. It stops roaring and starts whispering, because the only real power it ever had was the fear it borrowed from you. When you no longer tremble, it loses its food. And in that silence, something ancient awakens, a sense of authority, calm, and almost sacred presence. You're no longer the hunted. You become the observer, the tamer, the one who rides the beast instead of running from it. This is where true transformation begins. It's not glamorous, it's not clean. It's slow, painful, and humbling. But the power that emerges from this process is the kind that cannot be faked, the kind of strength that comes from self-possession, not self-denial. You realize that every urge was a messenger, every craving a code written in the language of unmet needs. When you translate that language, the war turns into a negotiation. The demon that once demanded control begins to offer cooperation. Imagine this in your daily life. The moment you feel the pull to scroll, to drink, to escape, pause and ask, what is this really asking for? Maybe it's asking for rest, but you've been punishing yourself with endless productivity. Maybe it's asking for connection, but you've been hiding behind irony and control. Maybe it's asking for meaning, but you've been feeding it dopamine instead of purpose. Every addiction is a prayer in disguise, a desperate attempt of the soul to feel alive again. Jung wrote that, no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. The descent into your darkness isn't failure, it's initiation. The addiction forced you downward because the gold was buried there. The goal was never abstinence. It was integration. To take the same fire that almost destroyed you and make it your light. And this is where Nietzsche returns, not as a philosopher of cruelty, but as a teacher of power. He would tell you that moral restraint is weakness dressed as virtue. That saying, no to your instincts forever, is like cutting the strings of your own instrument and then calling yourself peaceful because the music has stopped. The goal is not silence, it's harmony. When your inner forces play together instead of against each other, the sound is magnificent. You can feel it, can't you? That subtle shift where shame turns into curiosity, where guilt begins to loosen its grip. That's your consciousness expanding. That's what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of becoming who you are. The Bermensch, though, one who rises above, not by rejecting instinct, but by mastering it. You begin to see the addiction for what it is, a mirror reflecting the part of you that refused to die, even when everything else in you wanted to give up. The same drive that kept you chasing the next hit is the same drive that can fuel your purpose. The only difference is the direction. Destruction and creation are twin faces of the same God. Let's make this concrete. Think of a time when the craving felt unbearable. The trembling hands, the racing mind, the pull that made logic irrelevant. That's raw power. That's energy. Now imagine if you could channel that same intensity into something that required devotion, art, business, training, healing. What would your life look like if your obsession served your growth instead of your ruin? It's not easy, because the demon will fight to keep its throne. It will whisper, "You need me. Without me, you'll be empty." But you've seen through the illusion now. You know that emptiness isn't death, it's space. And space is where power begins. So you breathe. You let the craving wash through you like a wave without riding it. You name it. You observe it. And when the storm passes, you collect the residue of its energy and ask, "What can I build with this?" That's sublimation, the art of transforming compulsion into creation. It's the alchemy of modern souls. And here's the secret most people never hear. When you sublimate, you don't lose pleasure, you refine it. The small, frantic pleasure of escape becomes the deep, steady pleasure of purpose. You still feel desire, but now it serves you instead of enslaving you. The demon doesn't die. It becomes a guardian at the gate, a reminder of where you came from and what you're capable of. You stop fearing relapse because you no longer need to repress. The energy is integrated. The wound becomes wisdom. And one day, you catch yourself in a moment that used to break you. The trigger appears, the old temptation stirs, but instead of panic, there's quiet recognition. A half smile. The whisper no longer commands, it merely echoes. You nod to it, like greeting an old enemy who taught you more than any friend ever could. That's mastery. That's freedom, not from desire, but from dependence. Because when you face the demon within and learn to speak its language, you are no longer divided. You have reclaimed the throne of your own mind. The voice that once demanded submission now bends to your will. And this time, your will is not repression, it's creation. And that's when you finally understand what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of becoming the master of your own impulses, not a saint above desire, but a sovereign within it. You no longer live at war with yourself. You live in command. You see the chaos within you not as proof of your brokenness, but as evidence of your depth. Because only those who have stood in the fire know how to wield it without being consumed. That is the hidden promise of addiction. The paradox that the same force that enslaved you can become the very engine of your transformation. The demon that once dragged you downward can lift you higher than any shallow notion of discipline ever could. For you have felt the pull of your own abyss, and you've learned to walk its edge without falling in. And from that point on, your relationship with the demon changes. You no longer see it as an intruder to be exorcised, but as a companion to be trained. Like a wild horse that once trampled you but now carries you across vast, unseen territories of your mind. Its power is the same, it's just no longer against you. You ride the current instead of drowning in it, because here's the final truth most people never grasp. The inner demon never dies, it sleeps, it waits. But when you've integrated it, its return no longer threatens you. You recognize its presence like the shadow following your light. And rather than panic, you nod in understanding. You whisper, "I know what you are. And I know who I am now." This is liberation, not the sterile kind of purity that hides from temptation, but the fierce kind that can stand in its presence untouched. You no longer have to run, suppress, or numb. You can look desire in the eye and say, "You serve me now." That is the essence of Nietzsche's Bermensch, not the one who destroys desire, but the one who commands it. When you live like this, The world feels different. The air feels thicker, more real. Your movements deliberate, grounded. The same life that once felt fragmented now feels whole. You wake up not to avoid pain, but to create meaning. You stop chasing highs and start building peaks, and slowly, you realize that your story, the one you were once ashamed of, is the source of your strength. Because the addiction didn't ruin you, it revealed you. It showed you the map of your underworld, and now you know the terrain. Most people spend their lives terrified of that descent. They build walls around their impulses, pretending to be good, pretending to be in control. But you have seen the devil and made him bow. You've earned a kind of sovereignty no surface virtue can grant, and so when the whispers come again, as they always will, you no longer plead for them to stop. You listen, you interpret. You translate their hunger into motion. You channel their energy into art, into work, into presence. The demon becomes the drumbeat beneath your discipline, the pulse behind your purpose. You are no longer its prey, you are its poet. That is the true meaning of integration. The poison becomes the medicine. The darkness becomes the light. The energy that once demanded escape now fuels creation. And through this, you reclaim not only your autonomy, but your divinity. The part of you capable of turning suffering into power, chaos into order, pain into purpose. So now the question remains, the only one that matters. What will you do with your demon? You can continue pretending it's not there, repressing it until it explodes again in shame and silence. Or you can sit across from it, eye to eye, and say, I understand you now. You are my shadow, and I am your light. Together, we rise. The people around you may never understand the depth of this transformation. They may still call it a habit. They may still measure your progress by abstinence, not by awareness. But you'll know the truth. You'll know that mastery is not found in avoidance, but in integration. That to be whole, you must embrace what you once feared. And so, as you walk forward calmer, now quieter, more dangerous in your self-possession, you realize the addiction didn't take your power. It only hid it until you were ready to claim it. The demon was never your enemy. It was your initiation. And the next time you look in the mirror, you might notice something subtle. The eyes that once looked haunted now look steady. The face that once carried shame now carries authority. And behind that stillness, the faint echo of the demon's growl, no longer menacing but familiar. A reminder that inside you lives a force vast enough to destroy you, or to make you unstoppable. The choice is yours. The demon will always exist. But now it kneels. And as you walk away, the silence it leaves behind isn't emptiness. It's power, pure, reclaimed, silent power. So tell me, what's the name of your demon? And what work will you give it?